Hello, 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 dear developers, dear web developers, dear front-end web developers, and I believe Angular developers, right? So, because this is the session about web front-end and about Angular in particular. Let's meet each other. So, I'm Maxim. I came to you from Norway, and I do front-end web development as a hobby now because I work for Microsoft as a developer advocate. Any one of you folks do web front-end stuff, JavaScript? Awesome, I'm in the proper room. And maybe you even do some Angular stuff. Yes, I just confirmed that I'm in the proper place. Good. So, what are we trying to achieve by today's session? Let's find the answer on the question, how do we add the progressive app experience to our Angular project? And we have different options, so let's try to understand what will work better for us. Super briefly about me, I do lots of things for developer communities in Oslo where I live and worldwide. Also, as you see on my picture, I run a conference called NG Vikings. Maybe you heard about this one, right? I do not promote it now because it's fully sold. But if you feel that you have to be there, just come to me after the session. So maybe we'll find some solution. This is my Twitter. I tweet mainly about progressive apps, about Angular, about awesomeness of web platform. Before we dive deeper into technical stuff, and yes, by the way, I will tweet the link to these slides, which are online after the session, a bit later. It might be useful for you because I'll have some links and some code samples. Pretty simple, but still, you might want to follow me to just gather all the materials. What is progressive web application at all? I do not go through this classical definition from Wikipedia with 10 points. I bet you attended some sessions about PWA earlier. I just 100% sure because PWA is a pretty interesting topic, and you cannot find any front-end and even web conference without these sessions. So I love this definition found by folks from Mozilla Developer Network together with me, so I took some part in finding the proper words. And it's as simple as 2 sentences. So these are still web applications, right, which are working cross-platform, work everywhere, very bold statement, right? What and why do we even have this idea in mind? Of course, all in name of our users, our customers, our clients. Of course, we have to use some modern web APIs to achieve this behavior. And back to, so what is really cool for us, for developers from this definition is this work everywhere. Is that real? So is that real silver bullet for cross-platform development? Let's check. And yes, I can confirm that really progressive web application is working everywhere with some small asterisk. And work everywhere, not just as application, but natively without need to any wrappers, any cross-compilers, transpilers, you name it. So this is JavaScript code, which is native for basically every major platform, both on desktops, laptops, mobile devices. Yeah, so what is this about? Works everywhere, but not everything. Right? Progressive web apps as an idea is quite extensive, and for example, if you take Service Worker API, it's also quite large with modules, sub-modules, lots of methods. So as front-end developers, we don't have the privilege to have everything available in every client machine operating system, browser version. This is our life as front-end developers, right? So it's different for backend folks because if they cannot change the version of, I don't know, Node or PHP or Python on the server side, at least they exactly know the version, right? They build their code correspondingly. We don't have this privilege because we run our code on, I don't know, hundreds, thousands of different environments. But we know how to deal with this, right? And we live with this limitation, or I don't know how to call this, for years. So what could be the answer? And this is the second asterisk. So what could we use to still deliver something, to still not have red lines in the console? The idea called progressive enhancement, right? So we know how that works in JavaScript. It's just some extra ifs in our code. It doesn't make our code more laconic or beautiful, but again, this is life. And if we go back to definition of to abbreviation of PWA, progressive is exactly about this side of the concept. So PWA is, again, it's not a framework, not a library, not even a methodology. This is just the way we build modern web applications. And it becomes more and more true. I'd say that by using more and more features from service workers, from other parts of this idea, we say commoditize this. So maybe in a couple of years, this will be the default way to build the apps. We'll see. It really all depends on us and on our, again, users and customers and clients. What do we exactly bring to them is real offline experience and very optimized networking. And it's really easy to reason about what exactly do you want to achieve on web, because we all have experience with native mobile apps, right? So if on my iPhone I open Facebook, I don't care if I connected to the network at the moment or not. I really don't know, so I didn't turn on roaming. I just arrived, just landed from Norway actually just a couple of hours ago. But I always know that the application will start, right? At least the UI of the application, let's say application itself. Furthermore, most likely I will see the data I downloaded, I don't know, this morning when I was at home, right? And it was not possible for web before, because what we had before, HTTP caching is totally uncontrollable for us, totally unpredictable, and in majority of situations, it just doesn't work. So despite you know that maybe your browser cached your index.html, your CSS with JavaScript somewhere, you hit reload, and of course you see offline dyno, right? So it's not about this type of caching. There were different tries to achieve this behavior. App Cache API is one of these, but it was super developer unfriendly, and again, didn't work for cases which are a bit more complex than Hello World one pager. Good, so caching and true offline stuff. If we have the privilege to be connected, we can now inform our users, we can entertain our users, or we can annoy and bother our users by push notifications. Again, nothing to invent here. We just know how that works on native apps, both mobile and desktops. What is the core difference between push notifications and, for example, the bidirectional channel we can organize with WebSockets? It's quite serious difference because, again, once we subscribe to notifications from Twitter, for example, we don't care if the Twitter app open or not. Is that running or not? Of course, it's not possible. For example, if you try to reproduce the same behavior on WebSockets, this will work only if you run your application, right? If it's open. Web push notifications bring exactly this experience. So once you subscribed, you don't care about the status of your app. If you want to send, I don't know, your flight is ready to check in to your progressive web app airline project, no problem. So your user will receive this. Lots of other cool things which are exposed by Service Worker API. And Service Worker, this is the main driving force of all the idea. Let's say this is engine or heart or maybe even brains of all PWA. And finally, to wrap up all the assets we have, like index.html, like main.js, main CSS, to something that user can install. This is also very important from user experience point of view. We just provide JSON file with some meta information, and we just call this web app manifest because it's following web app manifest specification. So this is basically like pillars of what progressive web app is, and the goal in general is to reduce the gap between what native code, what native apps can do, and what web can do. And believe me, this gap is closing very fast. And furthermore, I believe there are some sides of web that are available only on web, so there are no corresponding APIs on native code, at least on all the platforms. Awesome. And just a reminder, it works natively. Your JavaScript works natively on iOS, on Android, on Windows, on Linux, on Mac, without any wrappers. So without Electron, without Cordova, without native script, without React Native, we just don't need it. And without all the stores. Good. It was just sort of refresher and my understanding of PWA. Now let's dive into Angular after all. And as any modern framework, Angular loves and embraces this idea. React came a bit even further in this love, because before Create React App version 2, they generated progressive web apps by default. So you just type Create React App, my super app, and it's scaffolded with Service Worker, with Web App Manifest. They removed this, say, default state of the application, because still some developers not aware so much about how Service Worker exactly works. So they just run the app and confused why they hit refresh and it doesn't work like intended. So now it's opt-in, but still, it was really like first step to make this as a default option we build the apps. This try failed, but this was the first try. So I believe in maybe some time, framework vendors will repeat this try. Good. So Angular, how do we make Angular application a progressive one? First, we can do everything by hands, really. You will enjoy and you will get lots of knowledge and skills, both in programming and in HTTP protocol. We'll scroll through this option very briefly just to understand that most likely we need some help. And there are really good helpers for us. First one is exposed by Angular team itself, called Angular Service Worker. This is option number 1 for us to go through today. And some other really nice PWA libraries, SW Precache or Workbox. Workbox is option number 2 for our today's session. And SW Precache, we can call it like grandfather of Workbox. It's, from the same team, but Workbox is totally re-architected, rethinked, and both options are production ready, by the way, NJSW and Workbox, so they are totally fine. But first, let's try to understand what do we exactly want to achieve, and let's start from the very minimal PWA, right? Which could be a combination of Angular plus some points from PWA checklist. There are lots of like checklists related to PWA on the web. I compiled the basic parts for you. So Web App Manifest. This is like a simple thing. It's a JSON file, so we do not go into details today. So it's not about the coding in big picture. Application shell. This is more interesting and requires some coding if you go for manual way. And there are different definitions of what is application shell in, I don't know, different areas of IT, different areas of web, even different frameworks have their own point of view on that. But in PWA application shell, this is application itself which can run offline. So basically, we have to take the distribution folder of our app and put it into some form of cache to make sure that it's available offline after very first installation. Good. And two next points, they are not like exclusively related to PWA, right? So they are on checklist, and you cannot call your PWA, your application a progressive one if it's not served via HTTPS or it's not mobile first. Yeah, this is very like subjective, right? So you can you can reason about is it fast enough or not? Is it mobile friendly enough or not? But still, I hope that we all build our apps like these 2 points. I don't know for some years. So this is just a good manner on the web. So okay, let's understand what is application shell. What will it take from us, from developers, if we try to create this manually, right? So let's just imagine this is our web application in just a mobile form factor, just to save some space for us. So it's not don't be confused. It's not only for mobile use case. No. It works everywhere. So it is just it's just a frame. How to call this? Application itself, right? And instead of data, I just, I don't know, architected, scaffolded some placeholders. So this is pretty well-known pattern, both for web apps and mobile apps. So your content will not jump when actual data will be loaded. Good. So first, we have to pick up exact specific set of files, right? And the smaller, the better. So like index, of course, some main CSS bundle, main JavaScript bundle. Good. We create the list, and we don't want that something we cached for the very first time will stay in cache forever, right? Because we update our application, it's evolving, we fix bugs, we introduce new bugs, so we iterate versions, and we have to think about versioning, of course, for our cached versions. The simplest way to manage this is to compare hashes, so we have to just calculate this. Then, on the very first load of the application, service worker is taking control. It's just a big picture, right? So let's say service worker is taking control and put this list into cache for the next usage, which are next loads. On the next loads, we load our index.html not from the network, but from the cache. And hereafter, cache, by cache, I mean very specific cache, very specific type of storage in your browser, available luckily in all modern evergreen browsers. It's not related to HTTP cache at all, so it's a next level. We follow all the rules of HTTP caching, but we add our own one, and this cache storage is very explicit in terms of how we work with this. So we do not provide, say, behavior, like this file should be cached by this and this rule. No, we say very imperatively that we want to take this file, index.html, and put into the cache. We use cache API interface, which is working with this cache storage. So when I mention cache, I mean exactly this one. And then it's the rest is about managing versions. If our service worker understands somehow using hash that there is a new version deployed, we have to download these files, we have to update our cache, right, for the next load. Because you remember that on the very first load, if something in cache, we serve this from cache immediately, just to achieve offline behavior, plus to improve even online behavior. So if you type some URL and hit enter, and boom, something was shown immediately for you, most likely this is a site driven by service worker, and most likely you got this data from cache, not from the network. You can check this. You can turn off your Wi-Fi and hit reload. If that works, definitely service worker. Yes, just try this. So at this moment, when we just served something from cache, we don't care about what is the version we have to serve this immediately. But when we got the knowledge that something was updated, maybe we have to show this message. Maybe. It's purely UX. It's not official part of PWA checklist. But for majority of projects, we can improve user experience by just saying, and the user decides themselves what to do, because, for example, you might start filling some huge form, and after like 1 second or 2 seconds, time needed to service worker to actually do this round trip to the server and the check, you get this message, and I don't know, most likely you don't want to refresh the window right now. Technically, as a developer, you can do it without this prompt at all. You just do location href reload. That's it. But please don't do this just because of user experience. I don't know, good manners. Good. So let's try to understand. And let's split into the steps. So this is purely on build, right? So it's not about running the application. This is about application runtime. And this is number 3, say just improvement of user experience. To understand how do we achieve this, let's give a very brief technical overview of what is service worker at all. So first, this is JavaScript code in form of one file or multiple files. There is a way to modularize this. Logically, this is a form of gate between your app and the outer world. On some events, service worker is taking control. One event called fetch, which is about all the outgoing requests from your application. I don't know, something you call from your JavaScript code explicitly, all these Ajax calls, something you have in your HTML markup, if you have EMG, SRC, logo PNG, also to be intercepted by service worker. And we can say even wider, it's not only from application, but from origin. So if user opens fresh session on the browser, but it was your service worker already has control over this origin, and type mysuperwebsite.com, they don't even see your application yet because it's physically not loaded, but service worker already got this request. Service worker which is registered inside your browser. So service worker is still residing in your browser or web view in a larger picture. But it has totally different lifecycle compared to your application main code. And on these requests, we are free to decide what to do. We can pass these requests as is to outer world. It could be, I don't know, your API, external API, CDN, whatever, something outside of the browser. Or we can try to our luck to find this resource in cache. And if we go for manual way, we implement all this ping pong manually, completely manually. Furthermore, service worker can get some events from operating system itself and even from the cloud itself. So it's about push. As you remember, I mentioned that to display push notification, you don't have to have your application up and running because it's received by service worker, and exactly service worker shows us this message. I don't know, your check-in is ready, you have new message in your mailbox, so your application is not taking part in this process at all. Okay, if you remember, service worker is event-driven worker. This is why majority of code you have inside this service worker JS or SWJS or whatever JS, the name is fully up to you, wrapped into some form of event listeners. It's very schematic code. We don't go into details. We just want to understand the life cycle. So on install event, we populate this cache storage. On activate event, we do some spring cleaning because we don't want to keep this all the versions for forever in our user's browser. It's up to us. We can keep it. We can try to, I don't know, put another 100 megs every time application load. If we are, I don't know, bad or evil developers. It's quite powerful API, and we can do lots of not so cool things, intentionally or not intentionally. Okay. But in the real world, we have to care about lots of things. And in these two code blocks, first, HTTP protocol is not the simplest ever one, and there are lots of different modes, options, and we have to provide code very explicitly for every scenario. Most likely, we don't want to completely wipe all the previous version if we changed only one file, right? If we changed, I don't know, a couple of bytes in CSS code, maybe we have to hand-pick this file instead of creating a completely new version. We have to somehow keep an eye on the size of the cache because it's not endless. And after all, we end up with some form of cache invalidation algorithm, which is, as you remember, after this famous saying, is one of two most challenging problems in programming at all. Anybody can call me the second most challenging thingy in programming. Cache invalidation and naming variables, or naming in general. Of course, this is sort of joke, but yes, in every joke there is only piece of joke, right? Good. So it was about caching, and now we can give control to our service worker to actually use this cache, to intercept these requests when browser asks, hey, application, give me index.html, and the service worker says, yes, I will try to do this. I will intercept this fetch event. And then, again, it's fully up to us how do we implement this logic. You see, it's very naive code when we check what was exactly the URL requested, and then we can write some code to try. If we go for network first, we can try our luck in network, like to download. If not available, we can check if this file in cache. Okay. At the same time, if network is available and we see that there is a new version, maybe we have to update the one we have in cache. And again, if network is available, most likely we want to save what we downloaded from network for next usage, so put into cache again. So it's lots of, say, flows. Same for cache first strategy when we try our luck in cache first. Even now it sounds not super trivial, right? But in the real world, it's say even worse, or let's use even more interesting, right? As I mentioned, you have to provide all kinds of fallback. What if not available here? What if not available here? And it's quite code, right? So if you go for manual service worker, variety of strategies. For example, stale while revalidate is when you serve something from cache immediately and at the same time check what was it updated. Instead of this set of ifs for all your possible URLs, you end up with implementing some form of routing. You don't want to have if with 100 branches, right? And most likely you want to fine-tune this behavior for this kind of resource, this kind of resource. So we can say that it's great flexibility if you go for a completely manual way. Again, it's absolutely possible to write your own service worker for Angular, for React, for framework-less app, or whatever. But yes, it will definitely make you better developer, but will take time. So why do we need tools? These 3 points, I think they are related to any project, any module, any library we use from NPM, right? So it saves our time. If we go and check source code, how that exactly works, if this is a good example, this will bring us some knowledge, right? Some skills for our next developer steps. But these 2 points are especially related to everything related to service worker, because specification is live, and there were some cases, I know at least one, when specification changed, and like very, very internal part. And of course it was related to security, there was break and change, and some websites driven by service worker, they went offline. that might happen. Hopefully, this was maybe one and only, but still, you have to really keep an eye on this. And lots of edge cases. So if something is more interesting than serving your hello world index.html with 200 status from your server, you have to care about many fallbacks. So let's have a look at two tools. Angular Service Worker, it's the code and all explanations will be on this blue background, and Workbox on light brown background. And Angular Service Worker, NGSW, so it's Angular Service Worker. This is shortening for this. Just to check you, so what is on this blue background? Angular Service Worker, yes. And since this is super native to Angular, right, it's all about automation on all the steps. When we scaffold, build, and serve. And it's schematics, Angular CLI, and Angular Service Worker itself are our helpers. How to scaffold this? This is literally one-liner, so ng-add and corresponding schematics. It's a bit more wide than just service worker, so this is why they called it not service worker but PWA. Why? Because it also scaffolds web app manifest and even some pre-default icons. So if you run this on your fresh Angular project or your existing Angular project, say in 90% of the cases, this will work fine. So this will inject proper code into proper places of the files. What it does, some steps. We not go into details. So what in general schematic does? It automates boring tasks. It generates new files. It injects some code into our files. We can achieve everything manually. So schematics is just to automate. Next. On build, and it should be production build. It works only in this mode. What it does, it actually builds not service worker itself, but configuration for the service worker. In that sense, it's a bit different from other approach, for example, from Workbox, where we generate service worker file itself. But it's just a question of architecture. So we always deliver service worker file itself, which called ngsw worker.js as is. So it might be changed only from version of Angular to version of Angular. So in general, we don't touch this at all. We do not generate, regenerate. We don't touch this file. What Angular CLI does for us is generating of ngsw JSON, which is a settings file for Angular Service Worker. So you will find these two files in your dist folder, and it exactly to follow our steps. So first step, you remember on build time, we generate settings where we, for example, list the resources we want to pre-cache, and on runtime, this file is taking control. So how this ngsw manifest is looking like? Exactly like we mentally architected. It's a list of assets we want to pre-cache and their hash sums to maintain versions. Do we have some form of control over what we want to cache? Yes. So first, after you run schematics, you will find a file called ngsw config.json. And this is something for us, for developers. So we do not edit ngsw JSON ourselves, it's generated by CLI on the base of ngsw config.json. So this is where we literally list what we want to pre-cache. And we have some smart defaults, again, generated by schematics for us. This might work for maybe 90% of your projects. If you wish to add or exclude some files from what we call application cache, fully up to you. You can achieve this easily by just modifying this JSON. And then if we run the app, we'll see that after first run, the storage is not empty now. This is how we test everything in developer tools, and we can hit offline button and just reload the application. It's still working. So we achieved, and yeah, we can say goodbye to offline dyno. So we achieved offline use case application shell by just running one command, right? This is all about automation. How does it work here? So who can tell me the name of what we present on brown background? Workbox, yes, good. Despite it's the last session, I see you're still with me. Good, thank you. It's another approach. Also, it's, say, network automation library for our progressive web app. It equipped with really cool set of features going completely out of the box, but the main benefit is we keep control on our own service worker. So we do not rely on what, say, Angular team delivered to us, on what functionality they gave us, right? And we have 3 different working modes. For Angular, the most friendly one is node module, right? We don't want to expose our webpack just to configuration file just to make our app progressive. It's too obtrusive. CLI maybe is not the best option for CI/CD flow. Node module. Okay, let's have a look how does it work. We install module called Workbox build because this will help us on build time. We can safely put into the developer dependency, so we do not use it on runtime. And as for majority of node modules, we have to write some Node.js script, which is like JavaScript, right? Again, very schematically. We have some configuration, and then, we inject something into something based on this configuration. Let's have it like this for now. What do I mean by configuration? It's quite similar to what we have in ngsw config, right? So we also provide some patterns. It's obvious. So to pre-cache something, we have to explain to service worker, ngsw or workbox, what to pre-cache exactly. It's different, a bit different way, but it's just question of syntax, right? But what's completely different is that we have a field called source service worker, SW-SRC, where we exactly inject something. Let's keep it as a secret for now. What do we exactly inject? Let's have a look how this source service worker could look like. Just two-liner to provide, again, same offline experience. We import Workbox library itself. It's like default option, but we, of course, can save this library and keep it hosted on our server and locally. And the magic method is this one, pre-cache and route. It actually does all the magic by pre-caching and serving. But you see, in source version of service worker, it contains empty array, right? How to say to Workbox service worker what exactly to cache? We have to inject this data here. And if we go back to this code, this inject manifest is exactly about this. So we iterate through distribution folder based on a pattern we provided. We build the list of resources. It looks like this. Again, quite similar to what ends up in ngsw config, slightly different syntax. And we do the file operation, not we, but Workbox build module. We inject this array here, and now our service worker is ready. We just have to copy this to our folder. And it covers build step and run step covered by possibilities of Workbox library. So same result, but different scenario. Okay, the last step is just to add the running of the script to our build flow, and of course it makes sense to keep it after we build the application itself, because it takes files from a distribution folder. Okay, so for the application shell, in ngsw, super simple to start, and even default options will work for majority of the project. In Workbox, we have to provide some code, some extra effort, but we keep control over service worker. Good. Let's check how does it work for point number 3. You remember we have this problem when we serve updated version of the app, our user, for the first time, they will still see old version because you remember we serve it immediately from cache. And on the next load, if we created our service worker correctly, if we configured ngsw or workbox or provided manual code and it's okay, we'll see version number 2. The question is, how do we inform our user with a message, something like this? Blue background, Angular service worker. We have special service called SW update. And if we want to achieve this behavior, to show this message, we have to provide some code. Bit of code, but it's fully in Angular way. So we import, we use dependency injection of this service, and we use observable. Observable called available. We subscribe to this observable, and if a new data item came to this stream, we are good to show this message. But please don't use exactly this code. It's just a native JavaScript alert, which is blocking all the user experience. You might want to use some, I don't know, snack bar or whatever as unobtrusive as possible dialog in UI library you use on your project. So we have point number 3 covered. Furthermore, if we provide one extra field in our config JSON, we can use this to tell what was updated exactly. Again, in the same observable, this app data field is available for us. Then we can show something like this. Maybe it's not crucial to update, to hit refresh if we just added some new picture of dinosaur, right? So we can give some more info to user for them to take informed decision. Nice. Workbox, sorry. It's all about using the same module called pre-caching, but in addition to the fact that Workbox is modularized, it's also based on plugins, plugins delivered by Workbox team, and we can write our own plugins. So the one is called broadcast update, solving exactly this problem. What we have to provide is the name of the channel. Let's keep it as is now. And in our Angular code, we listen to this channel, just using this name. I call this channel application shell. And broadcast channel is API existing in, I don't know, my majority of the browsers. I believe maybe only older version of Edge do not have this support. Yeah, anyway, so it's, you can use this safely. And if event came to this channel, we are good to show the same message. So I just reduced number of code, but it might be same, I don't know, Angular, not Angular, sorry, JavaScript confirmation. Good, so this is option number 1. Option number 2 is a bit different approach. Let's do a step back and understand how do we register service worker against our application. If we go for ngsw, it's all done for us. So this scaffold added registration code to our main JavaScript bundle, so we don't care about this at all. Registration is obligatory step just to say to the browser, hey browser, against this origin, I want to have this file called swjs or something as a service worker. So it's just like agreement between browser and this origin. In Workbox, we do it manually. So if we use Workbox, we have to provide this code, and to automate this, we can use another library called Workbox window. And this is for our runtime. Again, if we dive into Angular code, the best place to put it is main TS and resolve of promise bootstrap module. In general, the rule of thumb, when do we register service worker? Rule is simple, as late as possible. Because we don't want to compete for network resources, for CPU resources with the main thread. So keep in mind, everything related to progressive apps, everything related to service worker is progressive enhancement. Your application should survive without this at all. So if you base your application on service worker features, it's wrong architecture. So we have to keep this in mind that in some browser, under some condition, this registration of service worker might never happen. How do we do this exactly? So first, feature detection. If service worker in Navigator, and you have to provide this check in 100% of the cases, but Angular Service Worker includes this for you. Then we use this freshly imported library called Workbox Service, and we use register method of this, which is basically just syntax sugar over native registration service worker method. But what we can add here, some listeners. Good. And one of the listeners called installed, it's provided by Workbox Library, so it's provided by folks who wrote Workbox, is actually what we need. So if there is update property equals true, we are good to show this message. Additionally, super optionally, you can show some form of message like we just pre-cached all the data and your application is available offline. It's another just UX hint or trick. Maybe you've seen this on some websites. It's fully up to you. It's you decide. Do you want to inform user about this at all or not? And by the way, just to confirm, service worker registration is happening without any permission from user side. And I promise you, your browsers are full of service workers of the websites you visited. Literally, most likely you have hundreds of them. You can easily check, for example, in Chrome, open DevTools, Applications tab, and there is a checkbox hidden somewhere, says show service workers from all origins. You will be surprised how many service workers you already have on your machine. But no worries, they don't take memory, they don't take CPU, they just take some kilobytes of your disk. They wake up only when needed, Good. Just one technical addition is you have to fine-tune service worker lifecycle a bit to achieve this behavior. And if you wish to go deeper, I wrote a blog post about how this window module works exactly. So we can sum up this update flow. In Angular, if we write Angular, if we write some code, it's super Angular friendly. Plus, we have this interesting possibility to pass the version update. In Workbox, we have at least two options to achieve the same. Again, some code to be added, but it's quite developer friendly, I'd say, and quite stable and works good. Runtime caching, it's all about networking when we go beyond application shell, because our application most likely consumes some data from the network, right? Our APIs, not our APIs. How does it work in these two different approaches? Very briefly. In Angular Service Worker, basically, the only tool to configure its behavior we have is this ngsw config JSON, but it's quite enough for this functionality, I'd say. Again, we provide some pattern. For my sample, I took some API and breaking news and provide, say, behavior for this pattern. So we say return declaration style of this behavior. So we do not explicitly put something into cache, right? So we provide the configuration, which is good for us, for developers. So the strategy is the main switch here. For other types of URLs, you might use another strategy called performance. And I don't know why Angular folks say have their own names, but basically freshness is network first when we try to get to network first. Performance on its turn, it's when we try to hit cache first. And one other small hint, if you wish to reset everything you have in cache, for example, you changed the format of JSON you serve and you unsure will this work in the newest version of your app, you just iterate the field called version, it's optional one, in the same file in the ngsw config, If Angular Service Worker is seeing that version is different, it just ignores everything that was pre-cached before. Workbox, same idea, but more flexible, more extendable. Strategies registered against some patterns. And here they follow the most, say, common definition. So network first or cache first. And we can provide plugins here. So why is it more flexible and extendable? Because we have at least 5 strategies for now. Maybe they added more in comparison to 2 in Angular Service Worker, and variety of plugins and possibility to write our own code to literally control, I don't know, every single piece of the flow of caching. So to sum up, in Angular Service Worker, we don't provide any line of code. We cannot provide any line of code, even if we wish, because we have very fixed functionality set, and we fully rely on what Angular team thinks that should be in Service Worker. Yeah, we have some hint to provide some versioning. In Workbox, variety of strategies and super flexible thingy to have our own plugins. These were main points of your Service Worker life, of your progressive web app life. So let's just summarize. Angular Service Worker. It's one-liner to start with, works with majority of Angular projects, old and new, and main functionality you achieve without writing a single line of code. If you have to write line of code, it's Angular friendly, in dependency injection, observable, all that stuff. So in the big picture, it's add, configure if needed, and get what Angular team thinks you have to achieve in your progressive web app. Workbox is a bit different. First, it's really interesting and useful that you can apply your Workbox skills and knowledge to any framework. It's not related to Angular at all. It's framework-agnostic. You can use this for your framework-less apps, for your home page without a single line of JavaScript. You have to just have a couple of lines to register Service Worker, and this will work. And it still can improve your behavior of even one page of hello world and your picture. It might be installable, and it will work offline, and all. You can send even push notifications, right? Rich functionality goes out of the box. We just use corresponding modules and methods. If we have to configure, it's super flexible, and we still keep full power of our own Service Worker. Why is that important? Because what I listed is just, say, it's foundations, but it's not everything that we have in PWA, in Service Worker. I didn't tell about push notifications, about background sync, about lots of new stuff coming to Service Worker, like handling file extension. So just imagine that you on your desktop hit my picture GIF, and this was intercepted by Service Worker, and your web application started instead of your graphical editor. It's coming to web, and full access to file system is coming, and a lot of other cool things. We have to have some setup, maybe provide a bit of code, right? But after all, we really get what we want. So it's a maximum flexible solution. Before we go, this is URL I would like to introduce. It's Progressive Web App Slack team, which has more than 2,000 developers and folks from major browsers, frameworks, libraries, from Angular, from Workbox. They all there, and we try to keep our discussion very narrow and focused on practical solving problems. So welcome, it's open Slack team. And it was a pleasure to be here. Thank you very much.